Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Black Pine Archives. Tonight, we bring you 9 deeply disturbing true trucker horror stories. Documented accounts pulled from dispatch logs, incident reports, voice memos, and the kind of recordings drivers keep for themselves when nobody else would believe them. These are the stories that live on the edge of the map, where dead zones stretch for miles, where way stations appear without a permit, and where a voice on the CB can know what you have on your passenger seat. If you appreciate genuine horror rooted in reality, subscribe to Black Pine Archives and activate the notification bell so you do not miss our next file. After these 9 encounters, share your own road experiences in the comments, especially the ones you never tell anyone at the truck stop. Now settle in, lock your doors, keep your radio volume low, and if you hear your own voice coming back through the speaker with a delay of 1 minute, do not answer it. Evan Mercer had built his life around predictability. He ran night freight because the world was quieter, because traffic thinned out, because warehouse docks moved faster when nobody wanted to linger. His rig was clean, his logs were orderly, and his habits were almost ritual. Pre-trip walk-around, fuel check, lights, tires, seals, then the same thermos placed in the same cup holder, the same paper route sheet folded twice and slid into the visor band. He was not the kind of driver who filled the radio with chatter. He kept the CB low, mostly to hear road conditions, the occasional warning about debris, the occasional argument that he could ignore. He preferred to listen. He preferred to remain invisible. On the first Monday of November, he rolled east through a stretch long haulers called a quiet lane. The name sounded harmless, even comforting. It was simply a corridor of highway that ran between 2 wooded ridges where cell service blinked in and out, and where the night sky looked closer than usual. Evan knew the dead zones on that route. He expected them. He timed his calls around them. A little after midnight, he passed the last reliable tower and watched his phone drop to no service. The cab became its own small world. Dashboard glow, engine vibration, the steady sweep of wipers. He settled into the lull that came after the first hour, when the mind loosened and the body drove on muscle memory. Then his CB speaker cracked with a carrier tone that did not match the normal static drift. It was a clean, held-open signal, as if someone had keyed their mic and placed it in front of a mouth that did not breathe. The voice that followed spoke his truck number, not the company name, not a handle, not a casual driver. His truck number, precise, spoken with a cadence that sounded practiced. "My truck number is being called, but I am not transmitting." From the driver's dash recorder, Evan's first reaction was mechanical. He checked his mic. He checked the push-to-talk button and released it twice to be sure it was not stuck. He checked the channel selector. He verified the unit display. Receive only. No transmit light. No lockup. He did not answer. He waited for laughter, for a second voice, for some hint of a prank. Nothing came, only a faint hiss under the carrier tone, like distance being held back. Then the voice returned, still calm, still precise, and it began listing the places Evan had planned to stop. Not general areas, specific names, a fuel island, a rest area, a particular dock gate. It is listing my stops in order, like it is reading my route sheet. From the driver's voice memo, Evan told himself it could be coincidence. A driver behind him might have recognized his rig. A dispatcher might be playing around. A friend might be on the air with a joke. That explanation lasted until the voice described something no one outside the cab could see. It mentioned the coffee on his passenger seat and the torn cardboard sleeve around it, suggesting the tear like an identifying feature. It described the coffee on my passenger seat, including the torn sleeve. From the driver's written statement, Evan glanced down. The coffee sat exactly where it always sat when he carried one for later. The sleeve was torn because he had torn it at the counter without thinking, peeling off a strip that had annoyed him. That strip was now wedged in the door pocket, with old receipts and spare change. The voice had not only seen the cup, it had noticed the tear. Evan felt the first real change in the cab. The air did not shift in temperature, but the space looked subtly less familiar, as if the darkness outside had pressed closer to the glass. He tightened his grip on the wheel until his palms hurt. He reached for his phone and opened his navigation. The map loaded, then hesitated. The blue dot moved for a moment and then stopped. The screen drained of detail, as if an image layer had been removed. Roads, labels, contour lines, all gone. The dot remained, suspended on a blank gray field. The highway still existed under his headlights. The phone behaved as if it did not. He checked his ELD, expecting at least that to remain steady. It continued counting miles. It logged engine hours. It marked his speed. But the time display on his dash did something wrong in a way his body recognized before his mind did. The clock repeated a minute. It showed the same minute twice, then rolled forward again as if nothing had happened. The clock rolled back by 1 minute, then corrected itself. From the ELD export notes, Evan did not believe in omens, but he believed in patterns. 1 minute could be a glitch. A repeated minute felt like a boundary. The voice on the CB shifted from describing his route to steering it. It named a rest area he warning flagged in his mind as unnecessary. He had not planned to stop there. He had enough fuel. He had enough time. He had no reason to pull off into a dark lane of parked trucks. The voice spoke the rest area name like it had already watched him signal and drift toward the exit. Evan stayed in his lane. He drove past the rest area without touching his blinker. The carrier tone did not change. The voice did not express surprise. It continued as if the plan had never been optional. It began calling out mile markers ahead of him, smoothly, like a person reading signs before they came into view. It did not say, "Next marker." It said the number. Then a few seconds later, Evan saw the reflective green sign pass his windshield. It repeated my mile markers like it could see the signs before I reached them. From the driver's dash recorder, his rational mind kept searching for equipment explanations. A powerful transmitter, a repeater, a prank using roadside cameras, a hacked telematics feed. The problem was how intimate the voice sounded. It did not carry the distortion of distance. It sounded as if it belonged inside the cab, traveling through the speaker rather than through the air. Evan tried a small test without speaking. He adjusted his vent, changing airflow. He moved a paper from the passenger seat to the floor. He did these things quietly, the way a person tests whether they are being watched. The voice acknowledged the movement anyway. It referenced the sound of paper. It referenced the direction his cab fan was pointed. It referenced the slight rattle of a loose coin in the cup holder. I did not say anything, but it kept narrating what I did. From the driver's later interview notes, a few minutes later, the voice described the glove compartment, not the existence of it. The contents of it, it mentioned a folded receipt under the insurance card. There is a folded receipt under the insurance card. From the driver's voice memo, Evan felt his stomach drop because he had forgotten the receipt existed. It was from a tire shop weeks earlier, folded small and shoved into the glove box during a rainstorm. He opened the glove compartment with one hand while keeping the other on the wheel. The folded receipt sat exactly where the voice said it would. He did not know if confirming it made him safer or more vulnerable. It felt like confirming it made the voice stronger. He tried the truck radio next. He turned the knob slowly, scanning for anything but that carrier tone. The voice followed across channels as if channel selection did not matter. Weather band was empty. Local talk was empty. The voice stayed. He tried his phone again, no service. He tried to initiate an emergency call anyway, the way people do in fear, because dialing feels like action even when action is impossible. The call failed twice. On the third attempt, it connected for a few seconds, thin and fragile, with audio gaps like a torn tape. He spoke only enough to identify himself and his location. Then the signal dropped. Dispatch later logged a call fragment with no usable coordinates, only a note that the caller sounded confused by navigation loss. Caller reported navigation failure and unknown interference. From the dispatch incident, Log Evan made a choice drivers made when their instincts screamed louder than their training. He aimed for a public place. He chose a fueling station 30 miles ahead, a bright chain location with cameras and people, a place where the air would smell like coffee and diesel and where the world would feel populated again. The voice remained calm the entire time, never raising volume, never threatening, never pleading. It simply stayed one step ahead, as if it already knew where he would go. It began to correct him. It corrected a town name when he thought it. It corrected an exit number as he approached it. It corrected the time in a way that sounded like an argument with the clock itself. All corrections were exactly 1 minute ahead of my actions. From the dispatcher incident summary, when Evan finally pulled into the fueling station, the lights felt harsh and unreal, like he had driven into a stage set. He parked under a floodlight, shut down the engine, and sat very still. He waited for the radio to quiet. The carrier tone held. Evan turned the CB off. He watched the unit go dark. Silence returned for a few seconds, long enough for him to believe it was over. Then his phone rang, not in the normal way, not a visible incoming call. The phone screen lit and his voice memo app opened by itself, as if triggered remotely. A recording began playing without him touching it. It was his own voice. It whispered his truck number. It listed his stops in the same order the radio voice had used, with the same flat, patient cadence as if rehearsing him. That is my voice, but I never recorded that. From the driver's follow-up audio, Evan exited the truck and walked into the store without buying anything. He stood under fluorescent lights among strangers and felt no relief, only a temporary thinning of the pressure. He checked his truck from the window. Nothing looked wrong. No one stood near it. No one watched it openly. When he returned to the cab, the phone had stopped playing. The radio remained off. The world looked normal again, but normal no longer felt like proof. Evan left the fueling station and drove the remainder of the route without stopping. He kept his eyes forward. He refused to look toward dark exits. He refused to speak, even to himself, because he feared that his own words had become material something else could handle. He reached the distribution hub by dawn and backed into the dock with hands that felt detached from his body. He completed the delivery as if on automatic. He turned in his keys and requested a route change, then a schedule change. Then, when those requests were dismissed, he submitted resignation papers that surprised even him. The company categorized it as fatigue and stress. But the radio technician who inspected his unit later recorded something that refused to fit fatigue. Unit showed no recent transmit events during alleged broadcasts. From the shop diagnostic report, Evan could not prove the source of the voice. He could not show a transmitter. He could not pinpoint a tower. The only consistent fact in every record was the timing. The voice arrived with the repeated minute, and it stayed precisely 1 minute ahead, as if the road itself had learned how to step forward in time just enough to speak first. Archival transition. The road remembered his number without hearing it. The next file involved a stop that enforced rules without existing at all. Dylan Ross had hauled long enough to trust the rituals of the road. Way stations were one of those rituals. They were inconvenient, but they were consistent. You saw the warning miles out. You saw the lanes taper. You saw the lit board with state lettering and the familiar geometry of authority. Cones, floodlights, a scale platform, a boxy building with a window, and at least one person in reflective gear who looked like they had been standing in diesel wind for too many hours. On the second week of November, 2 nights after Evan Mercer filed his incident report, Dylan ran a refrigerated load along a main highway that should have been routine. The night was clear, cold enough to keep the air sharp, with fog laying low in the ditches like spilled milk. His trailer ran steady, his engine temp was normal, his logbook was clean. When he saw amber strobes ahead, he did not feel fear. He felt resignation, the way a driver felt when a schedule tightened and the road added a delay. He eased off the throttle and merged right without thinking. It looked exactly like a normal way setup from a distance. From the driver's insurance statement. The taper began where he expected it to begin. Cones appeared in a straight line, guiding trucks out of the travel lane. A reflective board stood ahead, angled toward his windshield, its letters readable at a distance. Dylan watched for the next signs, the state seal, the posted speed, the trooper vehicle idling near the shoulder. Instead, he saw emptiness. No cruisers, no workers, no other trucks queued in the lane. The amber strobes flashed from somewhere he could not locate, as if the light itself existed without a fixture. The cones looked right until his headlights hit them. The tape did not flare white the way it should have. It absorbed light. The cones became dull shapes instead of bright markers, forcing his eyes to work harder and making the lane feel narrower than it was. The surface changed under his tires. He rolled onto asphalt that looked newly poured, darker than the roadway behind him, with a faint sheen like oil. His suspension responded with a subtle shift, as if he had crossed onto a different material. The signboard was close enough now to read clearly. It carried instructions in plain block letters, not a logo, not a department name, not a state identifier, just commands. Pull forward, stop, wait. From the driver's dash, cam transcript, Dylan stopped where the board told him to stop. He waited because that was what he had been trained to do by years of enforcement and routine. The cab settled into a quiet that did not feel natural. Even the usual background noise changed. The highway hiss that normally rode in through the cracks around the doors seemed to fall away. The idling engine became too loud in the absence of everything else. He checked his phone. No service. That bothered him more than the lack of people, because the main highway usually carried at least a weak signal. He checked his CB, a thin hiss. No chatter, no weather band, no faint bleed from other channels. He looked for the scale house. There was no building, there was no windowed booth, no concrete pad, no posted speed sign, no cameras on poles. The area was flat and open like a freshly cleared lot, but it lacked the mess of a place humans used. No trash, no oil stains, no footprints, no tire scuffs. Nothing that said trucks had been stopping here for even a single night. He stayed put for what felt like 2 minutes and then looked at his dash clock. The minute repeated, not in a dramatic jump, not like a power reset. The display simply showed the same minute twice, as if time had hesitated and then tried again. His ELD kept advancing normally. My ELD advanced, but my dash clock repeated the minute. From the driver's compliance note, Dylan's body reacted before his mind could form a full explanation. His throat tightened. His hands went slightly numb on the wheel. He stared at the signboard, half expecting it to change, half expecting someone to step into his headlights and tell him to pull forward another few feet. No one came. The longer he waited, the more the lane felt like it had been built around him specifically. Not for trucks in general, for his truck, for his exact position, like a hallway that stayed empty until a person stepped inside it. Dylan decided to leave. He eased off the brake and rolled forward, preparing to merge back onto the highway and take whatever citation came later. That was the moment the place began behaving like a trap. The cones ahead appeared closer together than they had been seconds earlier. The lane did not simply narrow, it compressed, as if the corridor was being tightened like a drawstring. Dylan checked his mirrors. The taper behind him no longer led straight back to the highway. The road behind curved out of sight around a bend that had not existed when he entered. He could not see the travel lanes anymore, not even the glow of passing headlights. He could only see cones and darkness and the suggestion of trees where there should have been open shoulder. He stopped again. The instinct to keep moving fought with the instinct to make sure he was not about to jackknife in an impossible space. He sat for a breath, then another, then made the smallest steering adjustment to attempt a turnout. His trailer tugged strangely. The pivot felt wrong, as if the hinge point between cab and trailer had shifted by inches. The movement was subtle, but Dylan felt it in his spine the way experienced drivers did. Something about the geometry did not match his muscle memory. He set the brake and stepped out. The air outside smelled like fresh paint and cold metal. Under that was a faint note of something sterile, like new plastic warmed for the first time. The asphalt under his boots felt warm, not sun-warm. The night was too cold for that. It was warm in a way that suggested heat under the surface. He crouched and touched it with his fingertips. He pulled his hand back quickly. The warmth was real. Dylan scanned the ground for evidence of other people. There were no footprints. Not in mud, not in dust, not in anything. Only the marks he had made when he stepped out of his cab. There were no footprints anywhere except mine. From the responding trooper's field note, he walked forward to where the scale platform should have been. There was no platform. There was only a seam in the pavement, a perfectly straight line that ran across the lane like a boundary. It looked cut by a machine that had never dulled, too clean to be a crack, too deliberate to be settling. Dylan stepped over the seam. The pressure in his ears changed immediately, like altitude shifting too fast. His stomach rolled. For a moment, his vision felt slightly delayed, as if the world took an extra beat to reach his eyes. Behind him, his truck's marker lights blinked once, twice, 3 times. No switch input, no hazard lights, no manual control, just a brief pattern, like something knocking politely without using a hand. 3 flashes, then nothing with no switch input. From the shop electrical report, Dylan backed over the seam and the pressure eased. He stood there breathing, staring at that line like it was the only honest thing in the entire setup. Then the signboard changed, without him seeing it change. It still said to pull forward and wait, but the spacing looked subtly different. The letters slightly misaligned, as if the message had been reconstructed from memory rather than printed. Dylan returned to his cab and locked the doors. He did not call out. He did not key his mic. He did not want his voice inside whatever system was running this place. He drove forward because forward was the only direction the lane allowed. The cones guided him into a curve that carried him away from where the highway should have been. Trees appeared where there should have been shoulder. Dark trunks pressed close, and the cones began to look less like equipment and more like pale markers placed to guide him deeper into timber. He glanced at his navigation again. The screen went gray. Not an error screen, not a loading map, a blank field, as if this road did not exist in any layer the device recognized. His dash clock repeated the minute again. His ELD advanced. His body felt like it was being moved through a copy of the world, a version built from the idea of a way station rather than the reality of one. Then the corridor ended as abruptly as it began. One moment the cones crowded his mirrors and the trees pressed close. The next moment he was back on open highway at speed, the lane lines crisp, the shoulder wide, the familiar glow of distant traffic ahead. His phone regained service as if nothing had happened. He pulled onto the shoulder at the first safe turnout and sat with both hands on the wheel, waiting for his breathing to return to normal. When he reached the next real way station, a permanent facility with signage and buildings and people, he asked the attendant if there had been any temporary enforcement activity behind him. The attendant checked a schedule and shook his head. There was no temporary operation scheduled on that stretch. From the state way station supervisor email, Dylan filed a report through his carrier. He supplied dash cam footage. He described the unmarked board, the absence of personnel, the repeated minute, the seam in the pavement. An investigator drove the route with him during daylight. The following week, they found nothing. No new asphalt, no disturbed shoulder, no cone scuffs, no evidence of any setup being staged and then removed. The location where Dylan swore it happened was only ordinary highway and empty ditch. But Dylan's dash cam footage existed. It showed the lights, the taper, the board, the command to wait. The image remained clear until the moment Dylan stopped. Then, for exactly 1 minute of footage, the video degraded into gray static while the audio remained intact, preserving the idle engine and Dylan's breathing and the soft click of his turn signal as he tried to decide what to do. Video loss duration matched 1 minute. From the carrier's claim adjuster notes, after that night, Dylan never stopped at an unmarked setup again. He passed anything that looked official but lacked identity. He accepted fines. He chose longer routes. He preferred paperwork and penalties to another place that demanded obedience without existing, because he had learned the difference between enforcement and imitation. And he had learned that on certain nights, the road could build a checkpoint out of nothing but light and instruction, then erase it cleanly as soon as you tried to prove it had been there. Archival transition: a scale without a scale house enforced silence. The next file involved a sealed trailer that answered with sound. Miguel Santos accepted the load because the dispatcher's urgency sounded practiced, like a script read too many times to too many drivers who asked too many questions. Miguel had been on the road long enough to recognize normal pressure and abnormal pressure. This was the second kind, the kind that tried to make a refusal feel dangerous. The pickup time was after midnight. The pickup address was a yard Miguel had never used. The bill of lading was thin, with most fields left generic, and the commodity line left blank in a way that felt intentional rather than careless. The only clear information was the seal number and the delivery window, as if the paperwork cared more about the fact of arrival than what was supposed to arrive. I am looking at the paperwork and there is nothing to describe the freight. From the driver's voice, Memo Miguel told himself it was a sensitive contract. He had hauled sealed loads before. Real sealed loads came with chains of custody, with signatures and contact names and procedures that made sense. This one came with a vague promise of a bonus and a line in the notes field that resembled a warning more than an instruction. He backed under the trailer anyway. The trailer looked ordinary in the way the most dangerous things often did. Standard height, standard doors, standard red and white reflective tape, a seal on the latch, bright and new, with a number Miguel copied twice to be sure. He checked the kingpin. He did a tug test. He listened for air leaks. The routine steadied him because routine was the driver's way of refusing fear. The first hour of driving was uneventful. The trailer rode heavy but clean, no sway, no thump, no loose straps sliding against metal. The night highway stretched empty enough that the tires became a steady hiss under the cab, like the road itself was breathing. Then the sound began. It was not the chaotic bang of freight shifting. It was not the flutter of a loose mud flap or the chatter of chains. It was measured as if someone had decided on a pattern and was committed to repeating it. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 knocks. Miguel's hands tightened around the wheel without him noticing. It was 3 hits, then a pause, then 3 more, like a signal. From the driver's dash recorder, he slowed and listened harder, trying to locate it in the way an experienced driver did, by vibration and timing and the way sound traveled through metal. The knocks did not come from the rear doors. They seemed closer to the front of the box, near the bulkhead, where the trailer was hardest to access from the outside and where a driver could not easily check without climbing in. Miguel pulled onto the shoulder and set his brakes. The night air outside was cold enough to sting his nose. His flashlight beam caught the clean seal, the intact latch, the unscuffed door frame. He placed a gloved hand against the trailer skin. The knocks came again, and he felt them in his palm. The impacts did not rattle the hinges. They did not shake the latch. They traveled through the wall as a contained force, like something striking from the inside with deliberate restraint. Miguel stepped back and looked down at the ground for footprints, for any sign that someone had approached while he drove. There was nothing but his own tire marks and the scattered grit of the shoulder. He returned to the cab and called dispatch. The line connected. The dispatcher's voice sounded flat, as if it had been recorded in a quiet room and played back through a bad speaker. Miguel reported the sound, asked for permission to stop at the next public facility, asked for an inspection procedure, asked for anything that would make this feel normal. The response did not change in tone. The dispatcher did not ask clarifying questions. The dispatcher did not request location data. The dispatcher did not treat the report like a safety concern. Miguel ended the call with the sensation that he had not spoken to a person, only to a system that wanted him moving. They did not want me to stop, and they did not want a note in the log. From the driver's written statement, Miguel drove again. The knocks returned at consistent intervals. Not constant, not frantic, patient. He tested them the way he tested problems on the road. He changed speed. The pattern tightened slightly, as if it adjusted to remain audible over the engine. He changed lanes. The pattern stayed the same. He hit a rough patch of pavement. The pattern continued without stutter, separate from the natural rhythm of bumps and seams. A rest area appeared ahead, lit and public, and Miguel pulled in because the human mind searched for witnesses when it began to doubt itself. Under bright lights, the world should have felt safer. Instead, the trailer looked wrong in a way he could not immediately explain. The metal skin around the front corner reflected the lamps with a slightly dull sheen, as if it had been handled, wiped, or warmed. Miguel walked the length of the trailer, checked the undercarriage, checked the landing gear, checked the crossmembers. Everything looked intact. The knocking stopped while he stood there, and that silence felt more threatening than the sound. Miguel climbed back into the cab and sat with his hands resting on his thighs, listening to the empty air. The cab temperature dropped. The heater was on. The vents were blowing. Yet his breath began to faintly show in the windshield reflection. A thin haze that suggested the air around his face was colder than it should have been. Miguel looked at the trailer in his mirrors and noticed something subtle near the vent slats. Not a shape, not a hand, not a face, but a shift in darkness, as if something inside moved between light and metal. I saw the darkness change behind the vent, like something crossed it. From the driver's sworn statement, Miguel did not open the doors. He did not touch the seal. He drove. In the early hours before dawn, his CB picked up a weak transmission on a channel he did not use. It was not clear enough to identify a location. It did not carry the usual late-night chatter. It carried a strained voice repeating a short phrase over and over, like a person stuck in a loop. Miguel turned the volume down and focused on the road ahead. The knocks resumed, clearer now without the radio hiss, and for the first time he noticed that the pattern carried a slight variation at the end, like an extra tap that sometimes tried to begin and then stopped. It reminded him of someone learning a code, failing at it, and trying again. By the time he reached the delivery address, the sky had begun to lighten into the gray hour that made everything look washed out and tired. The destination yard was an industrial strip with low buildings and a gate that should have had a guard or at least a camera. The gate was open. The yard lights were on. The receiving instructions in his paperwork listed a dock door number, but when Miguel backed into position, no one came out to meet him. No forklift, no clipboard. No dock light change. He waited. The knocks did not stop at the yard. They continued, faint but persistent, and the idea of something inside striking the metal while no human being showed themselves began to feel less like a mistake and more like a plan. Miguel left his truck and walked to the office door. The building was lit. Through the glass he saw a desk and a phone and a chair slightly turned, as if someone had stood up mid-task. He tried the handle. Locked. He pressed his forehead briefly to the cool glass, trying to steady his breathing. On the tile floor inside, muddy prints tracked from the entrance toward the hallway, and then ended abruptly at a blank wall, as if the person wearing those boots had stepped into the building and then stepped out of reality. Miguel backed away from the door and returned to the cab. I can see footprints inside the office, and they stopped like the person walked into the wall. From the driver's voice memo, he called dispatch again. The call did not connect to a human voice. It connected to sound. For a few seconds, Miguel heard the interior of his own cab, the faint whir of the blower motor, the soft rattle of a cup in the holder, the tiny friction of his jacket sleeve as he moved. Then he heard the knocks, recorded cleanly as if the system had been listening to him the entire night and decided to play his own fear back to him. That call played my own cabin noise back to me, then the knocks, like a recording. From the carrier's internal incident, Ticket Miguel left the yard without unloading. He drove until he found an open state inspection station and requested an escort and a formal seal cut. He wanted paperwork. He wanted a witness who was not part of his company chain. He wanted someone else to stand beside him when the doors opened. An inspector met him at the bay, walked the trailer, photographed the seal, confirmed the number matched what Miguel provided. The inspector's body camera captured the procedure in a calm voice that sounded almost bored, the way professionals sounded when they refused to acknowledge how strange a situation felt. Miguel stood to the side and watched the bolt cutters bite into the seal. The doors opened. The trailer was empty. No pallets, no straps, no scuffs, no smell of freight, no residue from shrink wrap. Nothing that suggested cargo had ever been loaded, despite the way the trailer rode heavy all night. The inspector walked inside with a flashlight and paused near the front wall. There were fresh gouges in the metal, long parallel lines near the bulkhead, too clean to be old damage, too sharply defined to be accidental contact from shifting freight. The scratches looked like something had pressed hard from inside the box and dragged downward. I cut the seal, and there was no cargo, only fresh gouges near the forward wall. From the state inspector's body camera narration, Miguel stared at the empty space and tried to reconcile it with the hours of driving and the weight he felt behind him and the knocks that traveled through the trailer skin like a language. His paperwork still showed a destination. His ELD still showed the miles. His fuel receipts still proved he moved through the world normally. Only the load behaved as if it had never been a load at all. Miguel quit hauling sealed freight after that. He refused urgent requests that came without descriptions. He refused instructions that tried to prevent questions. He began sleeping with earplugs in his cab, not because he thought it would stop the sound, but because he could not stand the idea of recognizing the pattern again, because the pattern felt like it had been learned. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 knocks, and the longer he listened, the more it felt like something inside the metal had wanted him to answer. Archival transition: a trailer arrived sealed and empty, as if the road itself had delivered the absence. The next file began at a truck stop, with a stranger asking for a door that should not have opened. Riley Grant kept his stops consistent because consistency reduced variables, and variables were what got drivers hurt. He ran the same lanes, the same brand-name truck plazas, the same predictable windows of time, when the lot was busy enough to be watched but not so packed that strangers could hide between trailers unnoticed. He parked under lights. He avoided the back rows where cameras did not reach. He kept his doors locked even when he stepped out for a minute. That night the stop looked normal from the highway. It was late summer, humid enough that diesel exhaust hung low and sweetened the air with a bitter edge. The lot was crowded with idling rigs and reefers humming, the pavement marked by old oil stains and fresh rain-dark patches. Inside, the fluorescent light washed everything pale: coffee, fried food, tired faces, the kind of public space that felt safe because it was loud. Riley bought coffee, picked up a receipt he did not need, and walked back out with his shoulders slightly hunched the way drivers did when they carried things in one hand and kept the other free. That was when he saw her. She stood near his tractor step, not leaning, not wandering, not scanning the lot for a ride. She faced the trailer as if she was reading it. She wore a thin hoodie with the hood down despite the night air, and she carried no bag, no phone visible, no cigarette, nothing that explained why she was standing so close to a working rig. Her posture was not casual. It was expectant. She was waiting beside my unit like she knew it belonged to her. From the driver's written statement, Riley did not approach her directly. He widened his path the way he had been taught, giving space without making it obvious, keeping his eyes on reflective surfaces to see movement without turning his head. He climbed into the cab and locked both doors with a practiced motion. He told himself she was lost or looking for someone else or running a simple hustle. Then the headlights started, across the lot, near the darker perimeter where the asphalt met a line of scrub trees. 3 vehicles sat parked with their lights off. Riley had not noticed them before, or if he had, his mind had filed them away as ordinary cars waiting for someone inside. Now, one by one, their headlights flashed in a synchronized pattern. 3 bursts, a pause, 3 bursts, not random, not a mistake, a signal. Multiple vehicles flashed lights in synchronized pattern without movement. From the truck stop security note, Riley watched in his side mirror for the girl's reaction. She did not flinch. She did not look toward the vehicles to confirm. She simply remained where she was, as if the signal was meant for him, not her. Riley started his engine. He expected her to step back, startled by the sudden vibration and the change in tone. Instead, she moved 1 step closer to the trailer, as if she wanted him to see what she was indicating. The request itself never arrived as spoken conversation, at least not in any record that survived. What remained was Riley's description afterward, and his insistence that her attention was fixed on the box of the trailer, not on him. She indicated the cargo box, not the cab, like the trailer was the point. From the driver's follow-up statement, Riley pulled forward slowly, keeping his pace controlled, so he would not clip a pedestrian or a bumper. He watched the mirror, waiting for her to fall back into the crowd. She did not. She stayed in place as his truck rolled away, and in that stillness Riley felt something he could not explain. The sense that she did not need to follow because she already knew where he was going next. He exited the lot toward the frontage road instead of the highway. He did it deliberately, choosing a route that allowed quick turns and multiple camera-covered intersections. He expected the cars to stay behind, to give up when he stopped being convenient. They rolled out after him with the calm patience of something that did not require speed. Riley checked their headlights in his mirrors and realized another detail that tightened his chest. He could not make out plates when they crossed under streetlights. Either the plates were missing, or they were present in a way his eyes slid past without registering. I saw blank rear ends where plates should have been when they turned under light. From the driver's voice memo, his CB crackled. It was not the normal chatter of drivers trading lane information. It was a clean carrier tone followed by a voice that sounded trained, like dispatch or law enforcement cadence, without the identifiers that made it legitimate. The words, later summarized from his dash audio, were instructions that assumed compliance. The more disturbing detail was that Riley did not have the CB set to scan. He ran a single channel, yet the voice arrived as if his unit had decided to listen elsewhere on its own. I heard instructions on a channel I was not actively using. From the driver's dash recorder, Riley glanced at the radio display. It showed no channel number at all. The screen was lit, the unit powered, but the channel field was blank, as if the device could not name where the signal was coming from. He did not answer. He did not key his mic. He kept driving. The cars held their distance, not close enough to look like an obvious chase, not far enough to be coincidence. When he turned, they turned. When he merged back toward the highway, they merged at the same pace, maintaining a spacing that looked measured. Riley drove to a smaller stop a few exits ahead, one of the older plazas with more cameras and fewer people, the kind of place that kept its security monitors behind a smoked glass window by the counter. He pulled in under the brightest light he could find and parked in a lane that faced the storefront, so any person approaching him would be visible to staff. He took one breath, then looked toward the gap between trailers. The girl was there again, not walking across the lot, not emerging from a car door, simply present near his step, as if she had stepped out from behind the parked rigs without crossing open space at all. Riley's skin prickled with the same sensation drivers described after near misses, the delayed realization that a situation had been impossible before your mind caught up. She appeared again at the second stop without me seeing her cross the lot. From the driver's written statement, this time her focus shifted. She looked at the tractor side compartment where drivers kept tools, straps, and emergency gear. She did not fumble or search. She directed her attention to a specific locker with the certainty of someone who had opened it before, and in Riley's later account, the specificity was what cracked his composure. She indicated the compartment where the bolt cutters were kept. From the driver's voice, Memo Riley had bolt cutters because the road taught brutal lessons. Seals broke, locks failed. Someone got trapped behind a jammed latch. It was a practical tool that only mattered when something else had gone wrong. The implication was simple. She expected him to cut something. Riley left the lot immediately. He did not go inside. He did not confront her. He did not ask security to handle it, because asking would have required stepping out, and stepping out felt like agreeing to be close enough for whatever the night wanted. He drove straight to the next state-way station, the kind with cameras, troopers, bright floodlights, and official signage that could not easily be faked. He pulled in and parked under the closest camera mast. He did not report a girl. He reported suspicious vehicles. He reported a possible attempt to force a seal breach. He used language that would be taken seriously. A trooper came out. The trooper checked Riley's tractor doors, checked the trailer seal, checked the fifth wheel area for tampering, checked for tracking tags. It looked routine on the surface until the trooper paused and lifted their head as if they had heard something. Riley followed the trooper's gaze and saw her. She stood at the edge of the floodlight spill, just outside the bright circle where faces became clear. Her hoodie was the same. Her stance was the same. She did not wave, did not call, did not rush. She waited, unidentified female observed near perimeter of light and then lost visually. From the trooper's supplemental note. The trooper stepped forward. The security footage later showed a detail that made internal reviewers uneasy enough to label it a lighting artifact in their notes. The trooper crossed from light into shadow and slowed, then stopped as if encountering a boundary that was not visible on camera. They stood for a moment, angled toward the darkness, then turned back and returned to Riley with the expression of someone who had reached the end of a hallway that should have continued. The girl was no longer visible. Riley was told to continue. He did, but he did not stop again for sleep until sunrise. He drove with his jaw clenched, checking mirrors until his eyes burned, expecting the unplated cars to reappear at every ramp. They did not. That absence did not comfort him. It felt like being released rather than escaping. At daylight, he pulled into a rest area and conducted his own inspection the way drivers did when they no longer trusted anyone else's assessment. He checked the trailer seal again, intact. He checked his door handles, normal. He checked the airlines, normal. He ran his hand along the driver's side mirror housing and felt something that did not belong, a thin adhesive mark, clear, nearly invisible. A circle no bigger than a fingernail with a small notch cut into it, placed on the mirror in a spot that would be hard to see unless you looked for it. He scraped it off, but it left a residue that clung to the plastic like a stain. Clear adhesive residue consistent with a small applied tag. From the maintenance shop receipt, Riley replaced the mirror housing within a week. He replaced the radio unit within a month. He switched carriers after that. He changed routes. He stopped using predictable schedules, even though predictability had once been his safety plan. It did not matter. What stayed with him was not the coordinated headlights, or the blank channel display, or the trooper stopping at the edge of shadow. What stayed with him was the precision of her attention, the confidence with which she indicated the box, the certainty with which she selected the compartment that contained bolt cutters. As if the night had rehearsed the scene and expected Riley to play his part, and as if the tools were not meant for rescue or routine, but for opening something that should have remained closed. I felt like the request was a test, and the answer was supposed to be a cut seal. From the driver's written statement, Riley never proved who she was. No report contained a name. No camera produced a usable face. The truck stop chain confirmed no matching transaction history, no matching entry logs, no matching vehicle footage tied to the unplated cars. The weigh station footage remained archived under a category that usually held equipment malfunctions and unusual encounters, labeled in cautious language. But Riley's account remained consistent in every retelling, a girl who did not need to chase him, a signal that coordinated without urgency, a request aimed at the box, delivered without conversation, as if the road itself had learned that some drivers could be forced to open doors simply by making the alternative feel worse. Archival transition, a lit parking lot became a staged corridor, and the night asked for a door to be opened. The next file began with a detour that led to a truck stop that existed in the wrong year. Trevor Lane trusted navigation the way some people trusted prayer. He was not naive about maps. He knew routes changed, bridges closed, and apps guessed wrong. But he believed the core idea. If the screen offered a time-saving connector and the road looked drivable, it was worth trying once. Freight schedules punished hesitation, and a driver learned to treat minutes like fuel. On a rainy night in late autumn, construction shut down a familiar interchange and pushed traffic into a slow, blinking ribbon of detour signs. Trevor followed the official route for a while, then watched his GPS recalculate and present an alternate path labeled as a service connector. The estimate promised fewer lights, fewer merges, fewer miles. He took it. The transition felt subtle at first. Blacktop became older asphalt, cracked in patterns that looked like dried riverbeds. The center line paint was faded to a ghost. Reflectors along the shoulder were not the usual plastic tabs. They were glass lenses set into metal housings, throwing Trevor's headlights back with a sharper, colder sparkle that made the road look wet even where it was dry. He drove for what he later estimated as 10 minutes. The trees thickened. The road dipped and rose in gentle waves. His phone's signal weakened until it disappeared entirely, which did not alarm him because dead zones were common in rural corridors. Then he saw the sign. It was not backlit. It was hand-painted, mounted on 2 posts. The letters uneven but deliberate. The name was unfamiliar and the design felt out of time, like something copied from an old postcard and kept alive by habit. The truck stop existed where his GPS showed nothing. It looked like a truck stop that forgot what decade it was. From the driver's audio log, Trevor slowed as he approached, scanning for the usual indicators of modern operation. LED canopy lights, surveillance cameras, digital price boards. What he found instead was warmth that did not belong to the highway era he lived in. The canopy lights glowed amber and dim. The fuel pumps were older models with analog dials behind scratched plastic windows. The air smelled faintly of grease and cigarettes even before he opened his door, as if the building itself exhaled an atmosphere that public spaces had spent years scrubbing away. Trevor told himself it was a private stop, an old family-owned place that never updated. Rural businesses survived by refusing change. He pulled to a pump and stepped out. The rain felt different under the canopy, softer, as if it fell through a warmer pocket of air. The concrete beneath his boots was stained, but the stains looked like decades of layered use rather than fresh spills. He glanced for a security camera and saw none, not even a fake dome. Inside, the soundscape shifted. The doorbell chimed with a mechanical ring. A ceiling fan turned slowly, pushing cigarette haze that should not have been allowed indoors. The diner side smelled like frying oil and coffee that had been sitting on a burner too long. The register at the counter was mechanical, and when the cashier opened it, the drawer slid on metal rails with a heavy, practiced clack. Trevor paid for fuel and coffee with cash without thinking. It felt like the safest currency in an unfamiliar place. The cashier did not ask for a loyalty number, did not offer a receipt by default, did not speak in the chirpy script of modern retail. The exchange was efficient and quiet. Trevor took the coffee and sat for a moment because his shoulders ached, and because the stop felt like a pause the highway had been refusing him. He looked around the dining area and noticed other drivers. They were dressed wrong. Denim jackets with old patches, caps with logos he recognized only from vintage photographs, boots with thick soles and worn edges that suggested years of use but in a style that had fallen out of common circulation. Their faces looked ordinary and tired in the way truckers always looked at night, but their stillness was too coordinated. They sat as if waiting for a cue. The moment Trevor entered their line of sight, heads turned. Every head turned the moment I walked in. From the driver's written statement, no one approached him, no one greeted him. The silence did not feel like politeness. It felt like assessment. Trevor drank coffee fast and stood up again, suddenly aware of his own gear, his modern jacket, his phone in his pocket, his reflective striping. He felt like a person who had walked into the wrong room wearing the wrong uniform. At the counter, he asked for the receipt, without forcing casual conversation. The cashier printed one from a machine that sounded too loud in the quiet. The paper was thicker than most receipts, slightly rough. The ink was a dark purple-black that looked older than thermal printing. Trevor glanced down. The date made his stomach tighten so hard his throat went dry. Receipt date showed December of 1983. From the receipt photograph, he checked his phone. No service. The screen brightened and dimmed as if the device could not hold a stable reading. He checked his dash clock through the window and saw a brief, unnatural behavior. The minute display repeated itself, holding the same minute twice before advancing. He had seen enough odd logs on the road to know that coincidences sometimes aligned. What disturbed him was the pattern. The repeating minute was not a simple clock failure. It was precise. It was as if time itself stuttered and then tried to hide that it had done so. Trevor returned to his rig with the kind of urgency that was not panic yet, but close. He climbed in, locked the doors, and started the engine. The cab lights made his interior feel safe again, a private space he could control. Then he noticed the mark. On the inside edge of his trailer door, near where a person's hand would naturally rest, when climbing up to check a seal, a chalk symbol had been drawn. Not graffiti, not a joke. A simple, careful shape like a tally or a small coded mark, placed with intention. He did not remember seeing it when he parked. Symbol appeared on the trailer door after I returned from inside. From the driver's dash camera stills, Trevor wiped it with a wet rag from his cab. The chalk lifted easily, but the mark did not vanish the way chalk should. The outline remained faintly visible under the paint, like a stain. When he wiped again, the outline darkened as if he was revealing something beneath the surface instead of removing it. He stopped wiping. He pulled out. The lot was larger than it should have been. Under dim poles, rows of parked trailers extended farther than the building's footprint suggested. The exit lane curved between parked rigs, and Trevor followed it carefully, trusting that every truck stop was designed with flow in mind. Then he passed the same broken sign twice, a small, cracked board near the edge of the lot, leaning at an angle with a faded warning that looked like it once directed traffic. Trevor recognized it the second time because the brake pattern was unique, like a split bone. He passed it a third time. The loop tightened. The dim poles repeated. The same parked trailers appeared with the same silhouettes and the same gaps between them, as if the scene was a painted backdrop and he was being driven along a groove carved into the floor. Trevor's GPS screen went gray, not recalculating, not searching, blank, as if the road did not exist. My GPS went blank like the location had no coordinates. From the driver's audio log, his CB clicked on by itself. The volume rose a notch without his hand touching it. A burst of audio came through that sounded like an old weather alert recording, clipped and formal, with the cadence of broadcast systems from decades ago. Then the audio shifted into something that chilled him more than any warning. It carried his own voice, not a live transmission, not a conversation, a fragment of speech he remembered muttering under his breath in the diner, something small and private, replayed as if the radio had recorded it directly from his lungs. That is me, but it is coming from the radio. From the driver's audio log, Trevor did not key the mic. He did not respond. He kept driving, eyes fixed on the lane, jaw locked, hands tight enough on the wheel to make his knuckles ache. The lot released him abruptly. One moment he was threading through dim rows. The next moment he was on a narrow county road again, trees tight on either side, rain tapping the windshield like fingers. His truck handled normally, the engine sounded normal. The world looked normal, but his receipt remained in his pocket. He drove until the sky began to pale. When he reached a familiar highway marker and his phone regained service, notifications arrived all at once, stacking like a flood behind a dam that had just broken. The time snapped into place. The GPS map filled back in with roads and labels. Trevor pulled over at a public rest area and examined the receipt in daylight. The paper looked older than it should. The edges curled as if it had been handled for years. The ink faded slightly with each minute he held it, like the information was trying to evaporate back into the wrong decade. When Trevor later tried to locate the truck stop by name, he found nothing. No directory listing, no archived photos, no local references, no record of the business ever existing where he believed he had been. Location not found in historical directories or modern mapping databases. From the private investigator's summary, he sealed the receipt in a plastic bag because touching it made his fingers feel cold, and because the paper seemed to change faster when it was exposed to air. He kept it in his glove compartment for months, and he did not speak about it casually, because casual retellings made it sound like a story. But Trevor's account held steady in the details that mattered. The glass reflectors, the cigarette smell, the wrong register, the wrong clothes, the wrong date, the mark that would not erase. The strangest part was not the receipt. It was the way the people inside the diner had looked at him, not with curiosity, not with hostility, but with a quiet recognition that suggested he did not belong there, and that his presence was not a surprise, as if the stop had been waiting for a different driver, as if Trevor had arrived out of sequence. They looked at me like I was a mistake that walked in on schedule. From the driver's written statement, archival transition, a detour led to a truck stop that carried an older calendar and a tighter loop. The next file returned to a simpler pattern that traveled well. 3 knocks at the cab door night after night across different states. Aaron Pike ran long haul solo because he liked control more than companionship. Team driving meant sharing a schedule, sharing a sleeper, sharing decisions at 2 in the morning when fatigue made small disagreements feel dangerous. Alone, he could keep his own rhythm. He could stop when his eyes started to burn. He could choose well-lit lots. He could lock down his cab and sleep with one ear open, the way he had learned to sleep after years of waking to air brakes and reefer hums. He also kept rules, the kind drivers built to stay alive. Doors locked, curtains drawn, keys clipped, shoes placed the same way every night so he could step into them without thinking. A small flashlight on the dash, a second one in the door pocket, a cheap mirror angled to show the driver's side step without him having to move. The first knock arrived in weather that made everything sound sharper. It was a rest area on open plains, rain flattening the grass and wind rattling the big information board near the bathrooms. Aaron had pulled in late, backed into a space with a clear line to the light poles, and shut down. He fell asleep in layers, hoodie, and blanket, listening to the familiar symphony of idling engines and distant tires on wet asphalt. Then, at a time he could not later agree on, 3 knocks landed on his driver door. Not pounding, not frantic, 3 clean impacts evenly spaced, as if someone had practiced the rhythm until it became automatic. 3 knocks, then nothing, like a rule. From the driver's sleep log, Aaron froze the way a person froze when their body woke faster than their brain. He held his breath and listened for the next sound that should have followed. Footsteps in gravel, a cough, a muttered apology from a stranger who had walked to the wrong truck. None of that came. The air outside his door remained quiet enough that he could hear rain tapping the mirror housing. He waited. He watched his side mirror. He angled his eyes toward the little mirror he kept for the step. He saw nothing except the dark shape of his own door. He did what he always did when something felt wrong but not yet provable. He recorded a note on his phone with his screen dimmed low, capturing the time, the location, the details he would later doubt. He checked his dash clock and saw a minute he recognized because he saw it twice. The display held the same minute long enough that he could count his own heartbeat, then advanced as if nothing had happened. My dash clock repeated the minute, then corrected itself. From the driver's timestamp notes, Aaron stayed inside until the rain eased. When he finally stepped out with his flashlight, he found the detail that kept the event from becoming a simple nightmare. Boot prints sat directly beneath his step, fresh and sharply outlined in wet grit. They did not lead in from the lot. They did not lead away. They began at the step and ended there, like a person had appeared in that exact spot, knocked, and then stopped existing without shifting weight. In the morning, a state trooper documented the prints because Aaron filed a minor incident report through the rest area office, and the trooper happened to be nearby for a routine check. Footwear impressions present with no approach tracks. From the state trooper field report, Aaron drove out with daylight and told himself it would fade into the normal list of road weirdness. A prank, a drifter, a sleep start, a coincidence shaped by fatigue. The second night killed that explanation. Different state, different lot. A truck stop outside a mid-sized town, bright canopy, security cameras, other drivers awake at picnic tables smoking and talking. Aaron parked near the building. He ate, walked, checked his tires, returned to his sleeper, and fell asleep to the comfort of human noise. The knocks came again, 3 impacts evenly spaced, the same rhythm landing on the driver door at what felt like the same wrong hour. Aaron checked his phone first, he checked his dash clock second. They did not match. The minute discrepancy sat between them like a hairline crack. My phone time and dash time disagreed by 1 minute during the incident. From the driver's compiled log, he forced himself to move carefully. He shifted his curtain a fraction and looked out. No one stood there. No shadow lingered. The lot outside remained normal, lit and busy enough that an actual person should have been visible. He waited for the sound of someone walking away. Nothing. In the morning, security staff reviewed camera footage for that lane after Aaron requested it through a written statement. The video showed his truck sitting still. No one approached the driver's side. No one crossed between the camera and the cab. The audio channel, however, captured 3 impacts as clearly as if someone had knocked directly on the camera housing. Audio captured 3 impacts with no visible subject. From the security office note, that was when Aaron began treating the knocks as a pattern instead of an event. He started writing down everything, not just the knocks, but the context, weather conditions, lot type, whether he had used his radio, whether he had spoken to anyone that day, whether his GPS had glitched, whether his dash clock had repeated a minute. By the 4th night, he had a list that made him feel briefly rational because lists gave structure to fear. The knocks followed him. They arrived at the same point in his sleep cycle, when he had been down long enough for his body to sink, but not long enough to become unreachable. They arrived in places where normal interruptions would have been easy to explain, and they arrived in places where interruptions should have been impossible. Rest areas, pull-offs, a crowded lot, a nearly empty lot, rain, clear sky, wind, still air, 3 knocks, silence. By the 6th night, Aaron noticed something that made his stomach tighten every time he reached for a door handle. The knocks did not occur at a normal time. They occurred relative to the same error. Each incident happened at the moment his dash clock repeated a minute, or lagged behind his phone by exactly 1 minute, as if the knocks were synchronized to a seam in time that only appeared when his systems disagreed. Events aligned with the repeated minute consistently. From the driver's compiled log on the 7th night, the ritual changed slightly. Aaron woke to the 3 knocks and then heard something closer, quieter, more intimate than impacts on metal. Breathing. It sounded like a person standing inches from the door, exhaling slow and steady as if listening for a response. Aaron expected the glass to fog because the air outside was cold and damp. The window remained clear. He did not move. He did not reach for the lock. He did not touch the curtain. He lay still and let his own pulse hammer in his ears until the sound stopped. I heard breathing outside the door after the knocks. From the driver's voice memo in the morning, he found a smear on his door handle. Not mud, not grease from his own gloves. A thin, oily residue rubbed into the metal in a way that suggested a fingertip had traced it slowly, leaving a partial print. The length of the smear disturbed him because it was too long to match a normal human finger drag, as if the contact point had extended farther than it should. Residue smear consistent with skin oils. Length unusual. From the maintenance inspection note, Aaron escalated the problem the way a working adult escalated anything that sounded strange. He reported it through his company's safety channel. He attached photos. He attached his time logs. He requested a mechanical inspection of his door sensors and locks. He wanted to eliminate the possibility that vibration or pressure changes were causing him to mishear normal sounds. The inspection found nothing wrong. No loose panel, no latch rattle, no wiring fault that could explain impacts or time discrepancies. His truck's telemetry showed no door openings, no motion spikes, no recorded tampering, but Aaron's sleep log kept filling. By the 9th night, he tried a countermeasure. He installed a motion light under the driver's side step. He mounted a small camera aimed at the door handle and step area, configured to trigger on movement. He tested it in daylight. It worked. He parked that night under a floodlight and placed his phone on record. Microphone pointed toward the door. The knocks came. The motion light did not trigger. The camera recorded exactly 1 minute of corrupted footage. Gray noise, a brief tearing of pixels, then normal image again, as if the device had blinked at the wrong time. Recording corrupted for 1 minute during incident window. From the dashcam system log, the phone audio captured the 3 knocks anyway, clean and unmistakable, followed by a faint sound that did not belong in an empty lot, a soft metallic tap, distant but precise, like an echo answering a code. Aaron listened to that segment later with headphones on, and the hair on his arms rose with the certainty that the ritual was not simply knocking, it was signaling. 3 knocks recorded, followed by faint metallic tapping. From the driver's audio review note. On the 10th night, Aaron stopped sleeping in the cab. He paid for a motel room and left his truck in a well-lit lot with cameras. He slept inside a building behind glass and deadbolts, and he slept deeper than he had in weeks. In the morning, he walked back out to his rig and found fresh boot prints in damp grit beneath the driver's side step. No approach tracks, no departure tracks, just the same impossible punctuation mark placed under his door like a reminder that the ritual was not tied to his body being inside the cab. It was tied to the cab itself, to the door, to the idea of entry. Boot impressions present beneath step, no approach visible. From the motel lot incident note, Aaron began refusing night stops that left him alone with his own truck. He parked in clusters. He parked where people moved around at all hours. He stayed near buildings whenever possible. The knocks did not follow him into rooms or lounges or diners. They stayed with the cab, waiting at the edge of his private space. As his notes accumulated, one detail became harder to ignore than the others. The knocks never sounded angry. They never escalated into pounding. They never became frantic. They remained measured, patient, identical, like a rule that would outlast his fear. 3 knocks. Silence, a minute out of place, and the impression that something outside the door was not trying to scare him. It was trying to train him. To me, it felt like a ritual, not a threat. From the driver's final written statement, Aaron eventually changed routes. Then he changed companies. Then he stopped sleeping on the road entirely, taking local work that put him home every night. The knocks did not follow him to his front door. They did not appear on the bedroom window. They did not manifest in normal life. But the last thing he kept from that period was not a photo or a camera clip. It was a habit. Even years later, even in daylight, even standing beside a different vehicle in a safe place, Aaron caught himself pausing before opening a driver door, listening for 3 knocks that were not there, and waiting for the minute when time would slip just enough for something to arrive. First, archival transitioner ritual kept visiting the truck even when the driver refused to be inside it. The next file began with roadside kindness and ended with a mark that behaved like a claim. Jordan Beck had driven enough miles to believe the road had its own ethics, not laws, not policies, not the kind of rules printed in handbooks. A quieter code that passed between strangers in passing headlights and brief nods at fuel islands. If someone was on the shoulder with hazards on, you slowed, you checked, you helped if it was safe, you called it in if it was not. You did not leave people to the dark unless you had no choice. That belief had kept him human through years of night runs. It was also what made him stop at the worst possible time. The evening was damp and heavy, the kind that flattened sound and made taillights smear red across wet pavement. Jordan was running a regional line with a scheduled drop before midnight, his trailer light, his fuel good, his mind already halfway into the routine of dock doors and paperwork. He saw the car on the shoulder just after dusk. Hazard lights blinked slow and steady, the same rhythm people used when they wanted to be seen but did not want attention from the wrong kind of traffic. The car sat slightly angled, front tire close to the white line. A person stood near the open hood, arm raised in a small wave that looked rehearsed rather than desperate. Jordan checked his mirrors. No one was riding his blind spots. No fast headlights closing from behind. He eased off, signaled, and pulled over ahead of the car in a spot where his trailer would still be visible to traffic. He set his brakes, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped down into the thin mist. The first thing that felt wrong was how clean the engine bay looked. The road and shoulder were wet. Jordan's boots darkened instantly. The car's hood and fenders carried a film of grime and rain streaks, like everything else on that stretch. But under the hood, the components looked dry, dust-free, almost polished, as if the car had not been exposed to the weather at all. The second thing that felt wrong was where the person looked. They did not look at Jordan's face. They did not look at his hands or the flashlight or his company logo. Their attention stayed fixed on his driver's side mirror, tracking it like it was the only part of him that mattered. They never looked at me. They watched my mirror. From the driver's statement, Jordan stopped at a distance that felt safe. He did not open his toolbox. He did not step close enough to smell their clothes. He kept his voice neutral and his posture calm, the way drivers learn to act when their instincts whispered trouble, but their eyes could not prove it. He gestured toward the car and then toward the road, signaling that roadside assistance would be smarter than improvisation. The person responded by lifting a phone. The screen was blank, not cracked, not dark as if dead, blank as if the display itself had been erased, showing no icons, no time, no battery symbol, just an empty, glowless rectangle. Phone screen showed nothing, like it had been wiped clean. From the driver's follow-up notes, Jordan's throat tightened in a way that did not match the situation. A dead phone was normal. A blank phone felt like a prop. He backed away slowly, one step at a time, keeping the flashlight beam low, refusing to make the interaction bigger than it already was. He turned toward his cab. That was when his CB crackled. Jordan knew the sound his radio made when it woke up. He knew the little carrier hiss that sat under normal chatter. He knew the absence of sound when the unit was off. He had turned it off earlier to cut distraction on the final stretch. The radio made noise anyway. A carrier tone opened steady and clean, and then a voice came through his speaker with no request for a break and no playful drawl, like a dispatcher reading from a screen. It spoke Jordan's unit number. It spoke it correctly without hesitation, and then it said something smaller, something that should not have been available to any stranger in a wet roadside dusk. It described the sticker on his dashboard, the color of it, the shape, the childish uneven edges where his daughter had pressed it down herself the last time she rode with him. It mentioned my kid's sticker, which nobody sees from outside. From the driver's voice memo, Jordan did not argue with the part of his mind that wanted to pretend it was coincidence. He moved faster. He climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine with hands that felt clumsy. He did not check his mirrors for the person. He did not look back at the car. He pulled onto the lane and accelerated until the shoulder fell behind him like a bad thought. For several miles, he kept driving with the sensation that the air in his cab had changed texture, thicker and colder, as if someone else's attention had climbed in with him and sat behind his shoulder. His dash clock ticked forward, then hesitated, then showed the same minute twice. It corrected itself immediately, like a blink. My dash clock repeated the minute right after I pulled away. From the driver's log entry, Jordan did not stop until he reached a lit exit with businesses, cameras, and enough people moving around that he could borrow the comfort of their existence. He pulled into a truck stop and parked under a canopy light. He walked a slow circle around his tractor the way drivers did when they wanted to feel in control. He checked lug nuts, he checked seals, he checked his doors, then he checked the mirror. He found the dot on the underside of his driver's side mirror housing, exactly where the person's eyes had been fixed. It was small, clear, and almost invisible, unless it caught light at the right angle. It looked like nothing, and it looked like intent. A thin, reflective marker, the kind yard crews used to identify equipment in dim conditions, except there was no reason for it to be there, and no reason for it to be placed with such care. Jordan scraped it with a fingernail. It came off in one piece. The adhesive underneath stayed behind, tacky and stubborn, leaving a faint smear that would not fully wipe away. Transparent marker recovered from mirror housing. From the evidence bag labeled, Jordan placed the dot in a plastic bag and sealed it like he had seen people do on crime shows, because he did not know what else to do with proof that felt too fragile to trust his memory alone. He washed his hands. He ate nothing. He sat in his cab and watched the lot through the windshield, like he was waiting for something to reveal itself. Over the next week, patterns began to collect around him the way dust collected on the dashboard. He would pull into a stop and notice a vehicle parked far out where the light fell off, front end angled toward him like it was not there to rest. He would see headlights flash 3 times in quick succession and then go dark, as if someone had tested a signal and gotten confirmation. Headlights flashed in 3s at multiple stops afterward. From the driver's written timeline, he would hear his unit number on the CB without anyone asking for him, spoken calmly into dead air. The voice never sounded excited. It never sounded threatening. It sounded patient, like a system running a check. Under the voice, sometimes there was a second sound. Faint metallic tapping, 3 strikes. A pause, 3 strikes. So subtle he might have missed it if he had not already heard the pattern in other files. Metallic tapping under the broadcast matched a 3-and-3 pattern. From the driver's audio notes, his electronic logging device began to show small gaps, not long enough to trigger alarms, but long enough to feel like missing time. 1 minute at a time, the location pings vanished as if the truck had ceased to exist on the map, then returned with no explanation. Multiple 1-minute data gaps noted. From the carrier's telematics report, Jordan tried to do the correct thing, the practical thing. He took the truck to a shop and asked them to strip the mirror housing down, to look for anything that could transmit. A tracker, a chip, a battery pack, anything that would explain why a stranger cared about his mirror more than his face. The technicians found nothing electronic, no device, no wiring, no foreign hardware. What they did find was a faint, scratched mark on the inside of the plastic cover, small and deliberate, like a tally etched with the tip of a blade. Interior cover showed etched mark resembling tally. From the shop work order, Jordan stared at that mark until his eyes hurt, because it meant the contact had not been accidental. Someone had touched his truck long enough to remove a panel and put it back, or had done something worse that looked like the idea of tampering without leaving the comfort of an actual device. It felt less like being tracked and more like being claimed. The worst moment did not come on the shoulder. It came later when Jordan replayed the scene in his mind and understood what had truly happened. The car did not need help. The person did not need a jump. The wave had not been desperation. It had been bait, a staged interruption that relied on decency to create access, not to the man, but to the truck, to the mirror, to the place where a small, clear dot could be placed without resistance. Looking back, it felt like the goal was to make me stop, not to get help. From the driver's statement addendum after that, Jordan began driving past stranded vehicles with his hands tight on the wheel. He called breakdowns in when he could, giving mile markers and descriptions, forcing himself to keep the code without touching it. He watched other drivers pull onto shoulders and felt guilt spike sharp and immediate because he knew what it felt like to be left alone, but he also knew what it felt like to be watched for a mirror instead of a face. By the end of the month, he asked his dispatcher for route changes. Then he asked for day runs. Then he asked for local work. He wanted roads that had witnesses, roads that were crowded enough that the shoulder did not belong to anything waiting in the mist. He kept the little clear dot in a sealed bag in his glove compartment for a long time, proof that he had not imagined it. He eventually threw it away because keeping it felt like keeping a connection. Even then, he could not shake the lingering lesson. The road did not always punish cruelty. Sometimes it punished kindness, because kindness was the easiest way to make a driver stop and open the space around him. Archival transition. A broken-down car created access with a single wave. The next file involved a trailer labeled as non-living freight that still left marks from the inside. Chase Bennett hauled specialty freight for a brokerage that treated information like a liability. The broker loved neat rate confirmations and hated follow-up questions. Chase had learned the rules of that relationship. Take the load, photograph the seal, keep the paperwork clean, and do not waste time asking why a shipment needed silence. He did not like those rules, but he understood the economics. Brokers paid for speed. Drivers absorbed the uncertainty. This load looked ordinary on the surface. The bill of lading listed the commodity as equipment, non-living, temperature stable, sealed. The pickup yard sat behind a chain-link fence and a keypad gate lit by sodium lamps that made everything look older than it was. Chase arrived after dark, checked in, and backed into a door where no one came close enough to make eye contact for long. He inspected the trailer the way he always did. When a load came with the word sealed, he checked the seal number. He photographed it from 3 angles. He zoomed in until the crimp lines were sharp. He logged the number in his notes, then recorded a short video panning from his plate to the seal, because his insurance adjuster once told him video ended arguments faster than words. Seal verified and photographed before departure. From the driver's trip log, the trailer itself was a standard dry van with ventilation grates along the lower side panels, the kind used for equipment that needed air movement without refrigeration. It was not unusual. It was not suspicious. It was exactly the kind of nothing load that a broker preferred. Chase pulled out and merged onto the interstate, running a late-night stretch through light rain. The road noise was steady. The trailer tracked straight. The freight felt heavy but stable, with no sway and no shifting sounds. If there was anything unusual in the first hours, it was subtle enough to dismiss, a faint draft that seemed to slip forward from behind the bulkhead, even though his vents were set the same as always. A metallic tick that arrived in a pattern he could not quite name, then vanished when he focused on it. He told himself it was the trailer flexing in crosswind. He stopped at a truck stop well after midnight because he had enough hours to sleep and enough miles left to justify rest. The lot was half empty, wet pavement shining under floodlights. Rain hammered his roof and filled the air with that mineral smell of water hitting asphalt. He slept in short bursts. He woke whenever an airline hissed or a nearby rig started. He woke once to absolute quiet, the kind that felt staged, as if the lot had paused to listen. He checked his mirrors. Nothing moved. He went back to sleep. Just before dawn, he climbed down to do his walk around. The trailer's side wall near the vents made him stop breathing for a moment. Fresh scratches ran along the metal in long parallel lines just below one of the ventilation grates. Not paint scuffs from a forklift. Not rub marks from a dock plate. These were gouges deep enough to show raw metal under the surface. They were spaced too evenly and too close together to look like random impact. They looked like something had dragged along the wall. They looked like it had done it from the inside. Scratches looked like they came from inside, near the vents. From the driver's photo caption, Chase crouched and angled his flashlight so the light caught the edges. The grooves were clean and sharp, with tiny curls of metal still attached in places, as if the damage was recent enough that the air had not had time to dull it. He checked the seal immediately, expecting to find tampering. The seal was intact. The number matched his photo. The crimp had not been disturbed. He backed up a step and looked at the vents again. The grates were bolted in place, mesh intact, no bent edges, no missing screws, nothing that explained how scratches could appear on a sealed trailer without violating the seal. Chase called dispatch through the broker's after-hours line and requested an inspection. He described the scratches, the seal, the vents, the fact that the marks were fresh. Dispatch responded too quickly, with a firmness that did not match a person waking up and processing new information. The instruction was simple and repeated. Continue driving. Do not delay. Do not seek law enforcement. Deliver as scheduled. Dispatcher instructed to proceed without inspection. From the call log summary, Chase ended the call and stood in the rain with his phone in his hand, trying to decide whether he was overreacting. He was not the kind of driver who panicked. He hauled expensive things, and expensive things sometimes came with weird procedures. But this was not procedure, this was pressure. He took another set of photos, then another video, then zoomed in on the vent grate and traced the scratch lines with his flashlight beam, like he was trying to prove to himself that they were real. He made a decision that cost time and could cost him money. He refused to move until an authority had eyes on the trailer. He drove to the nearest highway patrol station that sat along the interstate, the kind with cameras on poles and a lot designed to make drivers feel watched in a legal way. He parked where his trailer side wall was clearly visible. He waited in his cab, hands on the wheel, listening to rain drum on the roof. When a patrol officer arrived, Chase did not tell a story. He presented evidence, photos, video, the seal number, the load description, the fact that he had requested inspection and been told to keep moving. The officer approached the trailer with a flashlight and took his own photos. He ran his fingers lightly along the grooves and then wiped his hand on his pant leg, like the metal felt wrong against skin. Marks consistent with recent gouging, raw metal visible. From the officer's report, the officer confirmed the seal was intact, and then explained, in the language of paperwork, the only way forward. Cut the seal with documentation, open the doors under camera view, confirm the cargo matched the bills, and reseal if necessary. Chase agreed. He wanted witnesses more than he wanted the broker's approval. The seal snapped clean when cut, as if it had been waiting to be broken. The doors swung open. The interior smelled like cardboard and pallet wood and cold air that should have warmed faster than it did. The cargo was there. Crates, palletized equipment, shrink-wrapped bundles stacked in a way that looked professionally loaded. Nothing shifted, nothing moved, no stowaways, no animals, no gaps big enough for a person. Chase felt relief for a single beat. Then he stepped closer and saw the inside wall near the front bulkhead. Matching gouges ran along the interior metal, deeper than the exterior scratches, as if the same force had dragged itself along the wall from within. The lines converged toward the front corner where a vent duct passed through the structure, creating a narrow blind spot behind the crates. And on one crate, the shrink wrap was punctured in 3 neat holes, evenly spaced and aligned like a deliberate test. 3 punctures noted in wrap, evenly spaced. From the evidence photo log, the officer checked under the pallets with a flashlight beam and a mirror tool. He checked the straps. He checked the floor. He found nothing living and nothing illegal. The result was clean in the way. Results were clean when the wrongness refused to become a chargeable fact. The officer documented the inspection, had Chase sign a compliance statement, and left him with a resealed trailer and a time loss that would be hard to explain to a broker who wanted obedience. Dispatch called again not long after, as if they had been waiting for confirmation that the trailer had been opened. The voice on the line sounded satisfied. It sounded less like concern and more like a system returning to normal. Dispatch follow-up occurred within minutes of inspection completion. From the driver's phone record notes, Chase got back on the road with the sense that he had stepped into a file already in progress. An hour later, the pattern returned. His CB was turned down low, not off, just quiet enough to be background. The speaker clicked with a carrier tone and then played a burst of audio that did not belong to any live broadcast. It was Chase's own voice recorded, repeating a sentence he did not remember saying aloud. The words were clipped and practical, the kind of thing he might mutter while checking a seal number. The recording ended with 3 distinct impacts like punctuation. That recording ended with 3 impacts. From the driver's dash recorder, Chase pulled his eyes off the road for a fraction of a second to look at the radio display. The channel indicator did not show a number. It was blank, as if the unit could not decide what frequency it was receiving from. He drove the rest of the way without stopping except for fuel, and at each stop he walked his trailer and watched the vents like he expected them to breathe. At the receiver yard, the unloading crew broke the straps and began moving pallets with forklifts. Chase stood by, doing what drivers did when a load had been complicated. Stay present, stay visible, leave a trail of witnesses. One worker paused near the open trailer doors and pointed at the inside surface. A handprint was pressed into the thin layer of road grime on the interior door panel, high enough that no one unloading would have touched it casually. It was not a smudge from outside handling. It was a full print, heel of the palm and finger pads clearly defined, as if someone inside had pressed their hand to the door while it was sealed. Print appeared on interior surface where no one had stood. From the receiver's incident note, the warehouse supervisor reviewed camera footage from the dock area. The footage showed the doors opening, workers stepping in and out, forklifts moving. Nothing stepped out that should not have been there. No person emerged from the shadows between pallets. No animal ran for daylight. The print existed without an arrival. Chase requested a copy of the incident note and kept it with his photos. He filed a report with his carrier and got the polite corporate response that reports often earned. Safety would review, claims would document, dispatch would consider route adjustments. Nothing changed. What changed was Chase. He stopped accepting sealed loads with vague descriptions. He refused brokers who demanded silence. He started placing a small camera inside his trailer when regulations allowed, aimed at the vent area, because he wanted proof that lived on the inside, where scratches supposedly began. He never caught anything on video, but he kept the photos of the gouges, the punctured wrap, and the handprint. And he kept the growing list of related anomalies that followed other drivers through other nights. 3 knocks, 1 missing minute, radios that spoke without a channel, dispatch voices that behaved like instructions instead of people. He did not claim he knew what it was. He only claimed the pattern, and he claimed, with a driver's stubborn certainty, that something had tested the trailer walls from the inside, while the paperwork insisted the load was non-living, archival transition. The freight stayed compliant while the metal still carried proof of pressure from within. The final file returned to the simplest contamination of all, A driver hearing his own voice come back over the radio, delayed by exactly 1 minute. Logan Price had hauled long enough to develop small habits that kept him anchored. He kept his cab clean. He kept his paperwork squared away. He kept his mind busy with quiet self-talk on overnight runs, not because he wanted company, but because hearing his own voice told him he was still present inside the miles. He did not use the CB to socialize. He kept it on low volume the way some drivers kept a porch light on, not for conversation, but for awareness. Most nights it carried nothing but distant chatter and the occasional warning about debris or a trooper parked in the median. On the night this file began, the air was wet with fog, and the highway felt narrowed by trees. The corridor was the kind drivers remembered afterward as a tunnel of dark where reflective markers seemed to hover in the mist, and the shoulders disappeared into blackness before headlights could define them. Logan's route sheet showed a straightforward run with no planned detours. He had enough fuel. He had enough hours. He expected the drive to be uneventful. A little after midnight, he spoke a small sentence to himself, barely louder than breath, a habit meant to keep his thoughts from drifting. He did not touch the microphone. He did not key the radio. 1 minute later, the same sentence came through his CB speaker in his own voice, filtered through faint static as if the air had recorded him and decided to play him back. I heard my own words replayed 1 minute later. From the driver's audio journal, Logan's first reaction was technical. He checked his transmit indicator. It remained dark. He checked the microphone cord. He checked the push-to-talk button for a sticking latch. Everything was normal. The radio was receiving, not transmitting. He told himself it could be interference, some form of rebroadcast, a nearby driver repeating him as a prank. Then the speaker spoke again, and the second replay was not identical. It carried a slight correction, as if the voice wanted a cleaner version of what he had meant to say. Returned phrase was corrected, not identical. From the driver's dash recorder notes, Logan tightened his hands on the wheel and tested the simplest possible variable. He tapped the steering wheel 3 times, evenly spaced, then sat still and watched the dash clock like it could settle the question by behaving. The fog smeared his headlights into pale cones. The trees did not move. The road lines remained steady under him. Exactly 1 minute later, 3 taps came through the CB speaker, clean and metallic, with a tone that did not match plastic on leather. It sounded like the taps had been made on a microphone casing or a hard panel, recorded and returned with intent. 3 taps came back, metallic, exactly 1 minute later. From the driver's incident log, Logan stopped speaking. He listened. The radio filled the gap anyway. It played a faint version of his breathing, pulled from the quiet of the cab, as if the device had turned into an ear rather than a mouth. Under the breathing, something else surfaced in the static, a soft, rhythmic layer that matched patterns reported in other Blackpine files. 3 light impacts, a pause, 3 light impacts. Logan reached for the channel selector and switched to another frequency. He waited. 1 minute later, his own voice returned on the new channel, without searching, without delay, as if the signal did not belong to a channel at all. He switched again. The voice followed. He turned the unit off. For a few seconds, the cab held silence so complete it felt like relief. Then his phone speaker clicked, and the same replay came through the phone as if the sound had simply moved homes. It followed onto my phone speaker after the radio went off. From the driver's written statement, Logan's navigation app stuttered at the same time. The map detail drained away for a stretch of road that still existed under his headlights. His blue dot jittered, froze, then jumped forward as if the route had been edited in the background. His ELD continued counting distance, but the location history showed a clean 1 minute gap where a ping should have been. His dash clock did something he noticed only because he had begun staring at it like a witness. It repeated the same minute twice before advancing, as if time had tripped and recovered. Time anomaly observed. Repeated minute on dash clock. From the driver's compliance note, the fog thickened until the reflectors on the shoulder looked like floating points. Logan began seeing similar points in the tree line, spaced too evenly to be random, at a height that did not match low brush. They were not bright enough to be headlights. They were not steady enough to be markers. They appeared, vanished, and reappeared farther ahead, as if the roadside was signaling back. Logan kept his eyes forward and his speed steady. The voice on the speaker shifted in tone. It sounded calmer, more official, like a dispatcher speaking with practiced reassurance. It began offering direction rather than echo. It said the next exit would be safer. It said there was a rest area ahead. It said he was showing signs of fatigue and needed to pull off. Logan did not answer. He refused to speak at all because speaking seemed to feed the system. He shook his head once, hard, as if the body could reject what the mind was trying to ignore. 1 minute later, the radio played his own voice agreeing to take the exit. The problem was not just that it sounded like him. The problem was that it used a phrase he typically used when confirming a change, a small verbal tick he did not notice until it was weaponized. That is my voice agreeing, but I did not agree. From the driver's audio journal, Logan's throat went tight. He gripped the wheel until his fingers ached and forced himself into mechanical focus. Lane position, speed, mirrors, breathing. He did not look at the exit sign longer than necessary because he feared recognition would become compliance. His phone buzzed once with a notification that made no sense. It was a missed call alert from his own number, time stamped 1 minute before the current minute. He did not call it back. Missed calls appeared from my own number, time stamped 1 minute earlier. From the Fleet phone report attachment. He tried a new test, silent but deliberate. He kept his mouth closed and formed a sentence in his mind, not speaking it, only thinking it as clearly as possible. He waited, counting. 1 minute later, the radio did not replay the thought. It replayed something else instead. A low, intimate version of his own voice whispering his truck number, the thing he never said aloud unless required. It sounded close, like it was not traveling through air at all. It sounded like it was inside the cab with me. From the driver's final voice memo. The highway stretched on until the first hint of dawn began to pale the fog. Logan did not stop. He did not take the exit the voice recommended. He drove to his scheduled receiver, a distribution center with bright lights and cameras and people, a place that felt anchored in rules and timestamps. He pulled into a dock lane, shut down, and sat still for a full minute, waiting to see if the voice would die when the wheels stopped moving. The radio remained quiet. Exactly 1 minute later, the speaker clicked and played one final sentence in Logan's voice, the kind of sentence someone said from a passenger seat when they wanted you to turn your head. He did not turn. He left the cab and walked inside, telling the supervisor he needed rest. He did not mention the radio. He said fatigue because fatigue was something the world believed without demanding proof. He waited inside longer than necessary. He drank water. He watched the time on a wall clock that did not repeat itself. When he returned to his truck, the driver door was unlocked. Logan was certain he had locked it. He checked his key fob history in the Fleet app and saw an unlock event time-stamped exactly 1 minute after he entered the building. Nothing was stolen, nothing looked disturbed, but the CB microphone was warm, as if someone had held it long enough to leave heat behind. Key fob event logged 1 minute after driver departure. From the Fleet telematics summary, Logan filed the report and asked for a radio replacement. The shop found no transmit events on his unit during the period he claimed the broadcasts occurred. The diagnostics came back clean in the way many Blackpine files came back clean. Technically normal, narratively impossible. Logan quit using the CB after that. He taped over the speaker grill like a superstition and drove with a different kind of silence, the kind that did not feel peaceful, only cautious. Later, when Blackpine Archives compared this file against the other 8, the structure aligned too neatly to ignore. A repeating missing minute, a 3-count signal, devices that behaved like ears, instructions delivered in the voice of the person being instructed, and the sensation reported by multiple drivers in different places that the road did not need to block a lane to control a choice. It only needed a voice. Final archival Note 9 files, 9 routes, different carriers, different drivers, different regions, 1 repeating mechanism, 1-minute gaps, 3-count signals, unmarked enforcement behavior, sealed spaces that tested their boundaries, and broadcasts that carried knowledge without sight. If one of these stories stayed with you, document it while the details are still sharp. And if you have ever heard your own voice return through a device when you were not transmitting, treat that moment like a warning rather than a curiosity. Subscribe to Blackpine Archives and keep your hands on the wheel when the radio speaks first. Some signals do not want an answer. They want an opening.